Derek's final words to me echoed through the Springfield courthouse hallway as he walked away with our children. "You'll be lucky to see them once a month after I'm done with you." That was 3 months ago. Today, he called me sobbing, begging me to destroy everything the private investigator had uncovered. What Marcus Rodriguez found in those manila folders didn't just give me back my children. It revealed a web of lies so twisted that even I couldn't have imagined the depths Derek had sunk to win custody. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday in my small Riverside apartment. Chloe was carefully packing her backpack with the precision only an 8-year-old could muster, while 6-year-old Tyler searched frantically under couch cushions for his favorite toy car. The routine comfort of our morning chaos masked the storm that was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I was buttering toast when Derek's black Mercedes pulled into the visitor parking space outside my kitchen window. My stomach immediately clenched. He wasn't supposed to pick up the kids until Friday afternoon, and Derek Sullivan never deviated from a schedule without a reason that usually spelled trouble for me. Derek stepped out of his car wearing his signature charcoal gray suit, the one that cost more than my monthly rent, and carried himself with that practiced confidence that had once attracted me but now set my nerves on edge. Behind him emerged a woman I'd never seen before, tall, blonde, wearing clothes that screamed money and authority. She carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive enough to feed my kids for a month. "Kids, your father's here early," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Chloe appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair still messy from sleep despite my attempts to smooth it down. "But it's not Friday," she said, confusion creasing her small features. "We're supposed to stay with you until Friday." Tyler bounded into the kitchen clutching his rescued toy car, his face lighting up when he saw Derek through the window. Despite everything that had happened between Derek and me, Tyler still worshipped his father, with the uncomplicated devotion only a 6-year-old could maintain. The knock on my door came exactly 3 times, sharp and authoritative. Derek's lawyer knock, I'd come to call it. When I opened the door, his expression was cold and professional, nothing like the man who'd once promised to love me forever. "Rachel," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "this is Vanessa Price, my attorney. We need to discuss some changes to our custody arrangement." Vanessa Price stepped forward with a smile that never reached her eyes. Everything about her screamed legal predator, from her perfectly manicured nails to her briefcase that probably contained documents designed to rip my world apart. She extended a hand that felt cold and calculated when I reluctantly shook it. "Mrs. Harper, I understand this might come as a surprise, but we have some concerns about the children's current living situation that need immediate attention." My blood turned to ice water. The phrase immediate attention, in legal speak, usually meant someone was about to lose something important, and I had a terrible feeling that someone was me. "What kind of concerns?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Derek stepped into my small living room without invitation, his expensive shoes clicking against my second-hand hardwood floors. He surveyed my modest home with barely concealed disdain, the furniture I'd bought from thrift stores, the walls I'd painted myself, the children's artwork taped proudly beside the kitchen table where we ate our simple meals together. "The concerns," Vanessa said, pulling documents from her briefcase with practiced efficiency, "involve the children's well-being, educational opportunities, and overall quality of life. Mr. Sullivan has recently become aware of several issues that suggest a change in custody arrangements would be in the children's best interest." I felt the room spinning around me. This couldn't be happening. Derek and I had agreed to joint custody 6 months ago when our divorce was finalized. We'd worked out a schedule that seemed fair, or at least survivable. I had the kids Sunday through Thursday, he had them Friday and Saturday, and we alternated holidays. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed both of us to maintain relationships with Chloe and Tyler. "What issues?" I demanded, finding some strength in my voice. "My children are happy, healthy, and doing well in school. I've never missed a doctor's appointment or parent-teacher conference." Derek finally spoke, his voice carrying that tone I remembered from our worst arguments. Calm on the surface, but laced with cruelty underneath. "Rachel, look around. Really look at this place. The kids deserve better than this." I followed his gaze around my small apartment. Yes, it was modest. Yes, the furniture showed wear and the carpet needed replacing. But it was clean, it was safe, and most importantly, it was filled with love. The refrigerator was covered with Chloe's honor roll certificates and Tyler's crayon masterpieces. Their bedrooms might be small, but they were decorated exactly how each child wanted them. This wasn't just a place where they stayed, this was their home. "There's nothing wrong with my home," I said, though doubt was already creeping in around the edges of my confidence. Derek had always been good at making me question myself, and apparently his talent for psychological manipulation hadn't diminished since our divorce. Vanessa placed the first document on my kitchen table with theatrical precision. "This is a motion for emergency custody modification. We're asking the court to immediately place the children in their father's primary custody while we conduct a full evaluation of the current arrangement." The words hit me like physical blows. Emergency custody modification. Primary custody. Evaluation. Each phrase was designed to strip away my rights as a mother, to reduce me to supervised visits and weekend phone calls. "You can't do this," I whispered, staring at the legal papers that might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the sense they made to me. Our custody agreement was just finalized. The judge said both parents had equal rights. "Circumstances change," Derek said, straightening his tie with the same gesture he'd used during our marriage, when he was about to deliver particularly devastating news. "I've been documenting some concerning behaviors from the children when they return from your house. Tyler has been having nightmares. Chloe's grades have started slipping." The accusations felt like daggers. Tyler had mentioned bad dreams once or twice, but what 6-year-old didn't have occasional nightmares? And Chloe's grades? She'd gotten a B+ on one math test instead of her usual A, hardly cause for concern. "That's not true," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could hear how weak they sounded. "Chloe is on the honor roll, and Tyler's nightmares are normal for a child adjusting to divorce." Vanessa placed a second set of documents on the table. "Dr. Amanda Foster, a child psychologist, has evaluated the children and has concerns about their emotional stability. Her report indicates signs of anxiety and regression that coincide with their time in your custody." I stared at the papers, feeling like I was drowning in legal terminology and professional opinions. When had Derek taken our children to a psychologist without telling me? How had he arranged evaluations and reports while I remained completely unaware? "You had no right to take my children to a therapist without my consent," I said, anger finally breaking through my shock. "That's a violation of our joint custody agreement." Derek's expression remained coldly professional. "I took them for evaluation because I was concerned about their well-being. As their father, I have every right to ensure they receive proper medical and psychological care." The way he said "their father" made it clear he considered himself the primary parent, while I was merely an obstacle to overcome. This wasn't about the children's well-being. This was Derek asserting control, just like he'd done throughout our marriage whenever I'd tried to have opinions or make decisions he didn't approve of. "Where are Chloe and Tyler now?" I asked, suddenly realizing I couldn't hear them anymore. "They're in the car with my sister Karen," Derek said. We thought it would be better if they didn't witness this conversation. The casual way he'd made decisions about my children without consulting me sent fresh waves of panic through my system. He was already acting like he had full custody, like I was just some inconvenience to be managed rather than their mother. Vanessa placed a third document on my growing pile of legal nightmares. "This is a temporary restraining order limiting your contact with the children until the custody evaluation is complete. You'll be allowed supervised visits twice a week for 2 hours each visit. 4 hours a week. 4 hours to see the children I'd carried for 9 months each, nursed through sleepless nights, comforted through scraped knees and broken hearts. 4 hours to maintain the bonds I'd spent 8 and 6 years respectively building with Chloe and Tyler." "This is insane," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You can't just steal my children because you've decided you don't like my apartment." "We're not stealing anyone," Derek replied smoothly. "We're protecting them. Rachel, you work part-time at a veterinary clinic making barely above minimum wage. You live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that's seen 3 break-ins this year. The children have to share a bathroom with thin walls where they can hear every sound from the neighboring units. Each criticism was calculated to wound, to make me feel small and inadequate. The veterinary clinic job I loved because it allowed me flexible hours to be available for the children became evidence of my financial instability. The apartment I'd chosen because it was clean, safe, and within walking distance of their school became a symbol of my failure to provide adequately. I provide everything my children need, I said, though my voice lacked conviction even to my own ears. They're loved, they're cared for, they're living in poverty, Derek finished. Rachel, look at Chloe's school clothes, look at Tyler's shoes. They deserve better than hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. The attack on my children's clothing felt particularly vicious because I knew there was truth in it. I shopped carefully, bought quality items second-hand, made sure the kids were always clean and appropriately dressed. But compared to the designer clothes Derek bought them for his weekends, my careful budget shopping looked shabby. Vanessa consulted her expensive watch with theatrical precision. Mr. Sullivan needs to get the children to their new school for enrollment. We'll need you to gather their belongings so they can transition smoothly to their father's custody.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
New school. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell. Not only was Derek taking my children, he was removing them from the school where they'd made friends, where the teachers knew their personalities and learning styles, where they felt secure and successful. You can't just transfer them to a different school in the middle of the semester, I protested. Chloe loves her teacher, and Tyler just made friends with the little boy who sits next to him at lunch. Meadowbrook Academy has smaller class sizes and better educational outcomes than Sunset Elementary, Derek said dismissively. The children will adjust and they'll receive a superior education. Meadowbrook Academy. I'd heard of it. A private school where tuition cost more than I made in 6 months. Another way Derek could demonstrate his superior ability to provide for our children, while simultaneously making me look inadequate in comparison. I looked around my small kitchen, seeing it through Derek's eyes for the first time. The mismatched dishes, the second-hand appliances, the carefully budgeted groceries in my modest refrigerator. Compared to Derek's luxury townhouse with its granite countertops and professional landscaping, my home suddenly felt impossibly small and shabby. I need to call my attorney, I said, grasping for some semblance of control in this nightmare scenario. Vanessa's smile turned predatory. Of course. Lisa Chen, correct? We've already spoken with her office. She's reviewing the documentation we provided and will be in touch with you shortly. The casual mention of my lawyer's name sent chills down my spine. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, while I'd remained completely oblivious to the legal machinery grinding into motion around me. Every detail had been orchestrated to catch me off guard and unprepared. Derek walked to my front door and opened it, clearly indicating this conversation was over whether I was ready or not. Through the doorway, I could see his Mercedes idling in the parking lot, and the shadowy figures of my children waiting in the back seat. The supervised visits will begin this Saturday, Vanessa said, packing her documents back into her leather briefcase with efficient movements. 2 hours at Pine Grove Park, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. We'll send you the details. 2 hours at a public park, watched by a stranger who would evaluate every word I spoke to my own children, every hug I gave them, every moment of connection we tried to maintain under impossible circumstances. Quote, Rachel, Derek said, pausing in my doorway. His expression softened just enough to remind me of the man I'd once loved, the one who'd promised to cherish me through better and worse. This doesn't have to be adversarial. If you agree to voluntary reduction of custody, we can avoid the expense and trauma of a lengthy court battle. The offer was presented as mercy, but I recognized it for what it was, an ultimatum wrapped in false kindness. Give up my rights willingly, or have them stripped away through legal proceedings that would drain what little resources I had while painting me as an unfit mother. I won't give up my children, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Not voluntarily, not through court proceedings, not ever. Derek's expression hardened back into cold professionalism. Then we'll see you in court, Rachel. And I promise you, By the time we're finished, you'll be lucky to see Chloe and Tyler once a month." With that parting threat, he walked to his car, leaving me standing in my doorway, watching him drive away with everything that mattered to me in the world. The children pressed their faces to the back window, Chloe looking confused and scared, Tyler waving goodbye with the innocent assumption that this was just another one of Daddy's surprise visits. I closed my door and slumped against it, staring at the legal documents scattered across my kitchen table. Emergency custody modification, psychological evaluation, supervised visits. The phrases swam together in a blur of legal terminology designed to dismantle my life with bureaucratic efficiency. My phone rang, startling me from my shock. Lisa Chen's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered with hands that shook, despite my efforts to stay calm. "Rachel, I just received some very disturbing documents from Derek's attorney," Lisa said without preamble. "We need to meet immediately. How quickly can you get to my office?" 30 minutes later, I sat in Lisa's modest law office on the other side of Springfield, watching her review the papers Derek had left behind. Lisa Chen was a small woman with fierce eyes and a reputation for fighting hard for her clients. But even she looked concerned as she read through the allegations and psychological evaluations. "This is more serious than I initially thought," Lisa said, setting the documents aside. "They've built a comprehensive case, painting you as an unstable, financially inadequate parent. The timing is suspicious. Derek has clearly been planning this for months. Can they really take my children away based on this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from Lisa's expression. "Family court judges have broad discretion when it comes to child welfare," Lisa explained carefully. "If Derek can convince Judge Patricia Lawson that the children are better off in his custody, she has the authority to modify your arrangement significantly." Judge Patricia Lawson. I'd heard the name before, a stern woman known for prioritizing financial stability and traditional family structures in her custody decisions. Exactly the kind of judge who would favor Derek's wealth and status over my love and devotion. "What do I do?" I asked, feeling helpless and overwhelmed by the legal maze I'd been thrust into without warning. Lisa leaned forward, her expression serious but determined. "We fight, Rachel. We investigate Derek's claims, we build a countercase, and we show the court that being a loving, devoted mother matters more than having a big house and expensive clothes." "But I don't have Derek's resources for a lengthy legal battle," I said, stating the obvious truth that had been weighing on me since Vanessa Price first opened her briefcase in my kitchen. "There might be another option," Lisa said thoughtfully. "I know a private investigator who specializes in family law cases. Marcus Rodriguez has a reputation for uncovering information that can change the outcome of custody disputes." "I can't afford a private investigator," I said immediately. Lisa smiled for the first time since I'd arrived at her office. "Marcus sometimes works on contingency for cases he believes in, especially when children's welfare is involved. Let me make a call." An hour later, I found myself in the parking lot outside Blackstone Investigations, staring at a small office building that might hold the key to getting my children back. Lisa had arranged an emergency meeting with Marcus Rodriguez, describing him as a former police detective with an uncanny ability to find the truth hidden beneath layers of legal maneuvering and calculated deception. The office itself was modest. Nothing like the sleek law firms Derek could afford, but something about its straightforward honesty appealed to me. A simple sign read, "Marcus Rodriguez Private Investigations," in plain black letters, and the waiting area contained comfortable but unpretentious furniture that suggested competence without ostentation. Marcus Rodriguez emerged from his inner office exactly on time, and I immediately understood why Lisa had recommended him. He was a man in his early 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, and his voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of asking difficult questions and finding uncomfortable truths. "Mrs. Harper," he said, gesturing toward his office. "Lisa filled me in on the basics of your situation. Tell me everything, starting from the beginning, and don't leave out any detail that seems unimportant. Sometimes the smallest inconsistencies reveal the biggest lies." For the next 2 hours, I told Marcus everything. Derek's sudden appearance with legal documents, the psychological evaluation I hadn't known about, the transfer to a new school, the supervised visits. I described our marriage, our divorce, Derek's controlling behavior, his obsession with appearances and status. Marcus took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking questions that seemed tangential, but always circled back to something relevant. He wanted to know about Derek's work schedule, his social media presence, his relationship with his sister Karen, even details about his expensive car and luxury townhouse. "Something doesn't add up," Marcus said when I finished my story. "Derek's attack on your parenting seems calculated and aggressive, but also rushed. In my experience, people don't go to this much trouble and expense unless they're hiding something significant." "What kind of something?" I asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying his notes. "That's what we're going to find out. Rachel, I'm going to be honest with you. Derek has built a strong case on paper. But paper cases sometimes crumble when exposed to real investigation." He quoted me a fee that made my heart sink, but before I could protest, he continued. "However, I have a policy about cases involving children and manipulative ex-spouses. I'll work for a reduced rate now, and if we uncover information that changes your custody situation, you can pay the difference when you're back on your feet." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since Derek had walked out of my apartment that morning. "You really think you can find something?" Marcus's smile was grim but determined. "Mrs. Harper, in 25 years of investigation work, I've learned that people who go to extreme lengths to appear perfect are usually hiding the most damaging secrets. Derek Sullivan has made a lot of effort to paint himself as the ideal father and you as inadequate. Let's find out what he doesn't want anyone to discover." As I drove home to my suddenly empty apartment that evening, I tried to process everything that had happened in a single day. This morning I'd been a mother making breakfast for her children. Tonight I was a woman preparing for a legal war that could determine whether I'd ever have a real relationship with Chloe and Tyler again. But for the first time since Derek had delivered his ultimatum, I wasn't completely powerless. Marcus Rodriguez was already working, already investigating, already asking the difficult questions that might reveal the truth behind Derek's perfectly constructed facade. I pulled into my parking space and looked up at my modest apartment windows, no longer seeing them through Derek's dismissive eyes. This was the home where I'd rocked my babies to sleep, where I'd helped with homework, where we'd built blanket forts and had dance parties in the living room. This was where I'd loved my children unconditionally, without expecting them to reflect well on my status or feed my ego. Derek might have money, influence, and expensive lawyers, but I had something he'd never understand. The fierce, protective love of a mother who would fight with everything she had to protect her children. And now, thanks to Marcus Rodriguez, I might finally have the tools to fight back effectively. The battle for my children was just beginning. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I had hoped that love might actually triumph over money and manipulation. Tomorrow, Marcus would start uncovering Derek's secrets. And maybe, just maybe, the truth would be enough to bring Chloe and Tyler home where they belonged. The first supervised visit at Pine Grove Park felt like performing my motherhood under a microscope. Mrs. Catherine Walsh, the court-appointed monitor, sat on a nearby bench with her clipboard and stopwatch, observing every interaction between me and my children with the detached professionalism of a scientist studying lab specimens. Her presence turned what should have been precious time with Chloe and Tyler into an awkward performance where even spontaneous hugs felt calculated. Chloe clung to me with desperate intensity, her small arms wrapped around my waist like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. Tyler, confused by the strange new rules governing our relationship, kept asking why the lady was writing things down and when he could come home with me. Each question felt like a knife twisting in my chest, especially knowing that Mrs. Walsh was documenting my responses for her report to Judge Lawson. "Mommy, I don't like my new school," Chloe whispered during one of our carefully monitored conversations. "The other kids all know each other already, and the teacher doesn't understand that I need to check my work twice before I turn it in." I wanted to promise her that this was temporary, that she'd be back at Sunset Elementary with her friends soon, but Mrs. Walsh was listening to every word. Any false promises or criticism of Derek's decisions could be used against me in court. Instead, I had to settle for generic reassurances that felt hollow even as I spoke them. Tyler spent most of our 2 hours showing me elaborate stories he'd created with his toy cars. But I noticed he'd grown quieter, more subdued than the energetic little boy who used to fill my apartment with laughter and chatter. When I asked him about his new room at Daddy's house, he just shrugged and said it was big but lonely. As our time wound down, both children begged to come home with me. Mrs. Walsh made careful notes while I explained that they had to stay with Daddy for now, but that I loved them and would see them again soon. The forced cheerfulness in my voice sounded fake even to my own ears, and I could see the confusion and hurt in my children's faces as I walked away from them once again. That evening, I called Marcus Rodriguez to check on his progress. 2 weeks had passed since our initial meeting, and the weight of legal proceedings and supervised visits was taking its toll on my sleep and sanity. Every day without real progress felt like another day. Derek's version of events became more entrenched in the legal system. "I've been busy, Mrs. Harper," Marcus said when he answered my call. Derek Sullivan is an interesting subject for investigation. On the surface, everything appears exactly as he's presented it. Successful businessman, devoted father, concerned about his children's welfare. My heart sank. If even a professional investigator couldn't find flaws in Derek's carefully constructed image, what hope did I have of proving my case in court? However, Marcus continued, and I heard something different in his tone. People who work so hard to maintain perfect appearances often have the most to hide. I've been following Derek's routines, his business dealings, his social connections. There are some patterns emerging that deserve closer examination. What kind of patterns? I asked, hope flickering back to life despite my efforts to stay realistic about my chances. Derek's work schedule, for one thing. He claims to Judge Lawson that he's available to care for the children because he has a flexible schedule as a real estate developer. But his actual movements suggest he's rarely home before 8 or 9 in the evening, sometimes much later. This aligned with what I remembered from our marriage. Derek had always been obsessed with his business dealings, often working late into the night and weekend networking events. The idea that he suddenly had abundant time for hands-on parenting seemed suspicious, but I hadn't known how to articulate those concerns to Lisa Chen in legal terms. I've also been looking into his finances, Marcus continued. Real estate development is a volatile business, and Derek's recent projects have faced some interesting challenges. There may be more stress in his life than he's letting on. What does that mean for my case? I asked. I'm not sure yet, Marcus admitted. But stressed people make mistakes, and mistakes reveal truth. I need more time to follow these threads, but I think there's something significant here. 3 days later, Marcus called with an update that changed everything. His voice carried an urgency that immediately set my nerves on edge, the tone of someone who discovered information that shifted the entire landscape of an investigation. "Rachel, I need to see you immediately. Can you come to my office right now?" I was at Blackstone Investigations within 20 minutes, my mind racing through possibilities both hopeful and terrifying. Marcus's expression when he met me in the waiting area confirmed that whatever he'd discovered was significant enough to alter the course of my custody battle. "Sit down," he said, closing his office door behind us. "What I'm about to tell you changes everything, but it also means we're entering dangerous territory." He opened a manila folder thick with photographs, documents, and printed emails. The top photograph showed Derek entering a building I didn't recognize, but something about his posture and the timestamp suggested secretive behavior rather than normal business activities. "Derek isn't just a real estate developer," Marcus began. "He's been involved in some questionable business practices that could constitute fraud if the right authorities started investigating." My mouth went dry. "What kind of fraud?" Marcus spread several documents across his desk, pointing to financial records and correspondence that meant nothing to me but clearly told a story he found compelling. Derek's development company has been taking deposits from potential buyers for properties that don't exist yet, then using that money to fund other projects. When the original buyers demand their properties, he stalls them with legal maneuvering while using new buyer deposits to eventually fulfill the old contracts. "Is that illegal?" I asked, though Derek's behavior sounded exactly like the kind of manipulative shell game he'd always been skilled at playing. "It's a form of Ponzi scheme," Marcus explained. "Legal as long as all the projects eventually get built and all the buyers get their properties." But if anything goes wrong, if the market shifts or financing falls through, dozens of families could lose their life savings. I stared at the evidence spread across Marcus's desk, trying to process how this information might help my custody case. Derek's financial misconduct was certainly concerning, but I wasn't sure how it proved he was an unfit father. Marcus seemed to read my thoughts. There's more, Rachel. Derek's stress about his business problems has been affecting his behavior in ways that directly impact the children. He pulled out a series of photographs taken with a long-range lens. The images showed Derek at various Springfield locations during times when he should have been caring for Chloe and Tyler, according to his custody arguments. One photo showed him at Cedar Hills Country Club during school hours on a Tuesday. Another captured him leaving Vanessa Price's office at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, when the children should have been home doing homework. Derek's sister Karen has been doing most of the actual childcare. Marcus continued. He drops the kids off at her house every morning before school, and picks them up after his business meetings end, sometimes as late as 9 or 10 p.m. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Derek had argued to the court that I was an inadequate parent who couldn't provide proper care, but he'd been essentially using his sister as a full-time nanny while maintaining the fiction that he was personally caring for our children. But that's not the most damaging information I've uncovered, Marcus said, his expression growing more serious. Derek's relationship with Vanessa Price goes beyond attorney-client privilege. He showed me photographs of Derek and Vanessa entering and leaving a hotel together, their body language suggesting intimacy rather than professional collaboration. Additional images captured them at restaurants and social events, behaving like a couple rather than business associates. Vanessa isn't just Derek's lawyer, Marcus explained. She's his girlfriend. They've been involved romantically for at least 6 months, which means their relationship predates your custody dispute by several months. I felt sick to my stomach. Derek's entire custody battle had been orchestrated not just to gain control of our children, but to create a new family structure with his lawyer girlfriend. The psychological evaluations, the emergency custody motions, the attacks on my parenting, all of it had been calculated to clear the way for Derek's new relationship, while making me look like an obstacle to the children's happiness. There's something else, Marcus continued, and I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. Vanessa Price has a history of aggressive custody tactics in other cases. I found 3 other divorces where she represented husbands seeking to strip custody from their ex-wives, and in 2 of those cases the mothers ended up with minimal visitation rights. The folder Marcus handed me contained information about Vanessa's previous cases, including newspaper articles about one particularly bitter custody dispute, where she'd helped a father gain full custody by arguing that the mother's part-time work schedule made her unavailable for proper child care. The parallels to my situation were unmistakable and terrifying. She's systematically destroying mothers' relationships with their children, I whispered, flipping through documentation of Vanessa's legal victories over women who'd had the misfortune to oppose her in family court. And now she has a personal stake in your case, Marcus pointed out. If Derek gains primary custody, she gets both a legal victory and a ready-made family with the man she's romantically involved with. I set the folder down, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and renewed hope. This information didn't just level the playing field. It potentially gave me advantages Derek didn't know I possessed. His perfect facade was built on lies, financial misconduct, and a conflict of interest that could invalidate much of his legal strategy. What do we do with this information? I asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering strategy with the same methodical approach he'd used to gather evidence. We have several options, but they all carry risks. If we reveal what we know too early, Derek and Vanessa will have time to create counter-narratives and cover their tracks. If we wait too long, Judge Lawson might make custody decisions based on incomplete information. I want my children back, I said firmly. Whatever risks we have to take, I want Chloe and Tyler to know that I fought for them. There's one more thing, Marcus said, pulling out a final set of documents. Derek's financial situation is more precarious than he's admitted to the court. His Ponzi-style development scheme is on the verge of collapse, and he's been using his personal assets to cover business shortfalls. The luxury townhouse, the expensive car, The private school tuition. It's all financed with borrowed money and buyer deposits. The image of Derek as a successful provider began crumbling in my mind. His attacks on my modest apartment and thrift store clothing took on new significance when viewed against his own desperate financial circumstances. He'd been projecting an image of stability, while his entire business empire teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. "So what you're telling me," I said slowly, working through the implications, "is that Derek is essentially a con artist who's been lying to the court about his ability to provide for our children, while conducting an affair with his lawyer and using his sister to actually care for the kids he claims to be personally raising." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I'm telling you. But proving it in court and making it stick will require careful timing and strategic disclosure." We spent the next hour planning our approach. Marcus would continue gathering evidence, while Lisa Chen prepared legal motions to introduce the new information. The key would be revealing Derek's deceptions in a way that maximized their impact while minimizing his ability to create alternative explanations. "There's one thing that worries me," Marcus said as our meeting concluded. "Derek has invested a lot of time, money, and reputation in this custody battle. When people realize their carefully constructed lies are about to be exposed, they sometimes become desperate. Desperate people make unpredictable choices." His warning sent chills down my spine, but also strengthened my resolve. I'd spent months feeling powerless while Derek systematically dismantled my relationship with my children. Now, for the first time since this nightmare began, I had weapons to fight back with. That evening, I sat in my quiet apartment looking through the evidence Marcus had gathered. Each photograph and document represented another crack in Derek's perfect facade, another piece of truth that could potentially bring Chloe and Tyler home where they belonged. But Marcus's warning about desperate people echoed in my thoughts. Derek had always been controlling and manipulative, but he'd also been calculating and careful. If he realized his secrets were being exposed, there was no telling what measures he might take to protect his new life with Vanessa Price. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. Tyler's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered immediately, grateful for any chance to hear my son's voice. "Mommy?" Tyler's whisper was barely audible, and I could tell he was trying to talk without being overheard. "Hi, baby," I said softly. "Are you okay?" "I miss you," he said, and I could hear tears in his voice. "Daddy's always gone, and Aunt Karen is nice, but she's not you. When can I come home?" The heartbreak in my 6-year-old's voice nearly undid my careful composure. "Soon, sweetheart. Mommy is working very hard to fix everything so you and Chloe can come home soon." "Chloe cries at night," Tyler whispered. "She thinks Daddy and the lawyer lady don't want us to see you anymore." Out of the mouths of babes. Even my children could sense the manipulation and deception underlying Derek's custody battle. Chloe, at 8 years old, was already recognizing that adult decisions were being made that prioritized Derek's convenience over the children's emotional needs. "Tyler, I need you to be brave for just a little while longer," I said, fighting back my own tears. "No matter what anyone tells you, remember that Mommy loves you and Chloe more than anything in the whole world, and I will never stop fighting to be with you." "I love you too, Mommy," Tyler said. Then I heard footsteps in the background, and he quickly whispered, "I have to go. Aunt Karen is coming." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the evidence of Derek's deception spread across my kitchen table. But for the first time in months, I felt genuine hope that justice might actually be possible. Derek had built his case on lies and manipulation, but the truth was finally coming to light. Marcus Rodriguez had given me more than evidence. He'd given me the power to fight back against a system that had seemed designed to favor Derek's money and status over my love and dedication. Tomorrow, Lisa Chen would begin preparing our counterattack, and Derek Sullivan was about to discover that his carefully constructed lies had consequences. The battle for my children was far from over, but the tide was finally beginning to turn in our favor. Soon, very soon, Derek would learn that mothers who fight for their children are far more dangerous than wealthy men who take shortcuts with the truth. Lisa Chen's office buzzed with an energy I hadn't felt since this custody nightmare began. Spread across her conference table were dozens of photographs, financial documents, phone records, and surveillance reports that painted a damning picture of Derek's carefully orchestrated deception. Marcus Rodriguez sat beside me, methodically organizing evidence into categories that would systematically dismantle every argument Derek had made to Judge Lawson about his superior parenting abilities. "The conflict of interest angle is our strongest immediate weapon," Lisa explained, holding up photographs of Derek and Vanessa Price in clearly romantic situations. "Vanessa has been representing Derek while maintaining an intimate relationship with him. That's a clear violation of legal ethics that could get their entire case thrown out." I studied the images Marcus had captured over the past month. Derek and Vanessa holding hands outside an expensive restaurant. Derek's car parked overnight at Vanessa's apartment building. The two of them sharing intimate conversations on her office balcony during what were supposedly professional meetings about my children's future. "But we can't just rely on the ethics violation," Marcus interjected, pulling out a thick folder labeled Financial Analysis. Derek's entire argument rests on his superior ability to provide for Chloe and Tyler. If we can prove his wealth is largely fictional, we undermine his fundamental case. The financial records Marcus had assembled told a story of spectacular deception. Derek's real estate development company existed primarily on paper, funded by a rotating series of investor deposits that were used to complete previous projects, while new investors were promised properties that existed only in architectural drawings. His personal assets were leveraged to the breaking point, with the luxury townhouse mortgaged beyond its actual value and his expensive lifestyle maintained through a complex web of business loans and credit arrangements. "How did you get access to all this information?" I asked Marcus, genuinely curious about the investigative techniques that had exposed Derek's financial house of cards. "Derek made several critical mistakes," Marcus replied with the satisfaction of a professional who'd solved a complex puzzle. "He used the same accountant for both his personal finances and his business dealings. He conducted most of his communications through email and text messages that he assumed were private. And most importantly, he trusted people who ultimately cared more about their own legal exposure than protecting his secrets." Lisa spread out a series of printed emails between Derek and his business partners. These communications show Derek knew his development projects were behind schedule and over budget months ago. He's been deliberately misleading investors while using their deposits to fund his personal lifestyle and legal fees for this custody battle. The implications were staggering. Derek hadn't just been living beyond his means. He'd been funding his attack on my parenting with money that belonged to families who'd trusted him with their life savings for dream homes that might never be built. "There's more," Marcus continued, opening another folder. "Derek's work schedule contradicts every claim he's made about being available for hands-on parenting. I've documented his actual daily routine for the past 6 weeks. The surveillance logs read like a catalog of neglect disguised as responsible fatherhood. Derek typically left his townhouse by 7 a.m., dropped the children at his sister Karen's house by 7:30, and didn't retrieve them until after 8 p.m. most evenings. On weekends, he frequently disappeared for hours at a time, leaving Karen to supervise Chloe and Tyler while he attended business meetings, social events, or romantic encounters with Vanessa. Derek Sullivan has been essentially functioning as a full-time nanny," Marcus explained. "She picks the children up from school, helps with homework, prepares their meals, and handles their bedtime routines. Derek shows up long enough to maintain the illusion of involved parenting, but the actual childcare responsibilities fall to his sister." I felt a complex mix of anger and gratitude toward Derek Sullivan. Angry that she'd enabled Derek's deception by providing childcare that allowed him to maintain his lies to the court. Grateful that someone was caring for my children with genuine affection while Derek pursued his business schemes and romantic interests. "We need to approach Karen carefully," Lisa said, apparently reading my thoughts. "She's not legally obligated to testify against her brother, but she might be willing to provide honest testimony about the children's actual living situation if we can demonstrate that the truth serves their best interests." Marcus pulled out recordings equipment and a stack of transcripts. I've been monitoring some of Derek's phone conversations through legal surveillance techniques. With court approval, we've documented several calls between Derek and Vanessa that reveal their strategy for this custody case. He pressed play on a small digital recorder, And Derek's familiar voice filled the room, but speaking with a casual cruelty that made my stomach turn. The conversation was clearly between Derek and Vanessa, discussing my children like they were obstacles to overcome, rather than human beings with feelings and needs. "Rachel's always been too emotional to think strategically," Derek's voice said through the speaker. "She'll probably cry in court, which will make her look unstable." Judge Lawson hates emotional displays from mothers. Vanessa's response was equally calculating. "The psychological evaluation gives us plenty of ammunition." Dr. Foster's report emphasizes the children's anxiety, and we can frame that as evidence of Rachel's inadequate parenting, rather than normal adjustment issues from divorce. "The kids will adapt." Derek continued with casual indifference. "Children are resilient. Once we limit Rachel's access and establish a stable routine, they'll forget about all this drama." I had to grip the edge of Lisa's conference table to steady myself as I listened to my ex-husband discussing my children's emotional well-being with the same detached professionalism he'd once used to negotiate real estate contracts. Chloe and Tyler weren't beloved children to him, they were assets to be managed and controlled. The recording continued with Derek and Vanessa discussing specific legal strategies for minimizing my custody rights, while maximizing their chances of creating a new family structure that suited their romantic relationship. "The private school angle is particularly effective," Vanessa's voice suggested. "We can argue that Meadowbrook Academy provides educational opportunities Rachel can't match, which demonstrates Derek's superior commitment to the children's development. And if she tries to fight the school transfer, we paint her as someone who prioritizes her own convenience over the children's educational advancement," Derek added with satisfaction. Marcus stopped the recording and looked at me with professional sympathy. "There are hours of conversations like this. Derek and Vanessa have been strategically planning every aspect of this custody battle, including psychological manipulation techniques designed to make you appear unstable and unfit." Lisa began organizing the evidence into presentation folders. "This gives us everything we need to file counter-motions that will completely change the trajectory of your case, but we need to be strategic about timing and presentation." "What's our strategy?" I asked, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Listening to Derek discuss my children with such cold calculation had been more devastating than I'd anticipated. "We're going to systematically expose every lie Derek has told the court," Lisa explained with growing confidence. "First, we file an emergency motion regarding Vanessa's conflict of interest and demand her removal from the case. That alone will force Derek to find new legal representation and buy us time to prepare our full counterattack." Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up surveillance footage. While Derek scrambles to find a new attorney, we present evidence of his actual financial situation, his neglect of parenting responsibilities, and his pattern of deceptive behavior. But most importantly, we let Derek's own words condemn him. The surveillance footage showed Derek at Cedar Hills Country Club during school hours, clearly enjoying himself with business associates, while his children were supposedly his primary concern. Additional footage captured him leaving expensive restaurants and social events, at times when responsible parents would be home, helping with homework and bedtime routines. "The beautiful thing about Derek's personality," Marcus continued, "is that he can't resist bragging about his cleverness. Those recorded conversations contain enough damaging admissions to destroy his credibility with any judge." Lisa pulled out a calendar and began mapping out our legal strategy. "We file the conflict of interest motion tomorrow, which will create immediate chaos in Derek's legal team. While they're dealing with that crisis, we prepare comprehensive counter motions, challenging every aspect of their custody arguments." "What about the psychological evaluation?" I asked, remembering Dr. Foster's report that had painted my children as anxious and unstable during their time with me. Dr. Foster's evaluation was based on information provided primarily by Derek, Marcus explained. "When we reveal his pattern of manipulation and deception, her conclusions become suspect. We can request an independent evaluation by a psychologist who hasn't been influenced by Derek's strategic presentations." The scope of Derek's deception was becoming clear. He'd orchestrated every aspect of this custody battle like a military campaign, using his business skills and Vanessa's legal expertise to systematically undermine my relationship with my children, while presenting himself as their devoted protector. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had allies who matched Derek's strategic thinking with genuine concern for Chloe and Tyler's well-being. Marcus and Lisa weren't just trying to win a legal battle. They were fighting to reunite a family that Derek had tried to destroy for his own convenience. "There's one more element to our strategy," Lisa said, pulling out a folder I hadn't seen before. "We're going to give Derek an opportunity to reveal his true character under pressure." Marcus nodded approvingly. Derek's personality type doesn't handle challenges well. When his carefully constructed plans start falling apart, he tends to become aggressive and make poor decisions. If we can document that behavior, it strengthens our argument about his fitness as a parent. "What kind of poor decisions?" I asked, though I remembered Derek's explosive temper during our worst marital arguments. "Threatening behavior, attempts at intimidation, maybe even financial retaliation," Marcus explained. "Derek has invested too much time and ego in this custody battle to accept defeat gracefully. When he realizes his secrets are being exposed, he'll probably try to attack rather than retreat." Lisa's expression grew serious. "That's why we need to be prepared for Derek to escalate his tactics. Men who feel their control slipping sometimes become dangerous, especially when children are involved." The warning sent chills through me, but also strengthened my resolve. Derek had already taken my children away and tried to destroy my reputation as a mother. There wasn't much more he could do to hurt me that he hadn't already attempted. "I'm ready for whatever Derek throws at us," I said with more confidence than I'd felt in months. I've lived with his manipulation and control for years. The difference now is that I have people fighting with me instead of facing him alone. Marcus began packing up his evidence files. "The next phase of this operation requires precise timing and coordination. Derek thinks he's controlling the narrative, but we're about to flip the script completely." Over the next week, our plan unfolded with the precision of a well-executed military operation. Lisa filed her emergency motion regarding Vanessa's conflict of interest on a Monday morning, creating immediate panic in Derek's legal strategy. By Wednesday, Judge Lawson had ordered Vanessa's removal from the case and granted a postponement of all custody proceedings until Derek could secure new representation. Marcus continued his surveillance operations, documenting Derek's increasingly erratic behavior as his carefully constructed plans began crumbling. The man who'd projected supreme confidence while taking my children away was now making frantic phone calls and desperate attempts to control damage that was spreading beyond his ability to contain. The real breakthrough came when Derek's business partner, Michael Torres, contacted Marcus directly. Facing potential fraud charges for his involvement in Derek's development schemes, Michael was willing to provide detailed testimony about Derek's financial deceptions in exchange for immunity from prosecution. "Derek has been using investor deposits to fund his personal expenses for over a year," Michael explained during a recorded interview. "The luxury lifestyle, the expensive legal fees, even the private school tuition for his kids. It's all been paid with money that belongs to other people." Michael's testimony provided the final pieces of evidence we needed to completely dismantle Derek's claims of financial stability and superior parenting resources. The man who'd argued that my modest apartment was inadequate for our children had been maintaining his luxury townhouse with money stolen from hardworking families. But the most damaging revelation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist who'd written the original evaluation supporting Derek's custody claims, contacted Lisa's office with concerns about how her report was being used. Mr. Sullivan provided very specific information about the children's behavior that influenced my assessment, Dr. Foster explained during our meeting. But after reviewing the case file more carefully, I'm concerned that I may have been given misleading information about the family dynamics. Dr. Foster's willingness to reconsider her evaluation was the breakthrough we'd been hoping for. With her support, we could request a comprehensive reevaluation of Chloe and Tyler that would be based on complete and accurate information rather than Derek's strategic manipulations. As our evidence files grew thicker and our legal strategy became more comprehensive, I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced since Derek walked out of my apartment with legal papers. Genuine hope for justice. Not just legal victory, but actual justice for my children, who deserved better than being treated as pawns in their father's selfish games. The final element of our plan involved giving Derek enough rope to hang himself with. Marcus arranged for Derek to become aware that his business dealings were under investigation, his romantic relationship with his former attorney had been exposed, and his actual parenting arrangements were being scrutinized by family services. Derek's response to these pressures would reveal his true character and provide the final evidence we needed to demonstrate his unfitness as a custodial parent. A man who truly cared about his children's well-being would focus on damage control and protecting them from the chaos he'd created. But Derek Sullivan had never put anyone's needs above his own convenience, and we were counting on that fundamental selfishness to ultimately destroy his custody case. The trap was set, the evidence was assembled, and Derek was about to discover that mothers who fight for their children can be far more dangerous adversaries than wealthy men who mistake manipulation for strength. Justice was finally within reach, and my children would soon learn that their mother had never stopped fighting to bring them home where they belonged. The call came at 11:47 on a Thursday night, jerking me from the first peaceful sleep I'd managed in weeks. Derek's name flashed across my phone screen, and something about the late hour and multiple missed calls I'd slept through made my heart race with parental panic. My first thought was that something had happened to Chloe or Tyler, some emergency that required immediate attention despite our strained circumstances. Rachel. Derek's voice sounded different, strained and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Gone was the cold confidence he'd displayed during our custody proceedings, replaced by something raw and frightened that immediately put me on high alert. Derek, what's wrong? Are the kids okay? I sat up in bed, already reaching for clothes in case I needed to rush to the hospital or handle some crisis involving our children. The kids are fine, he said quickly, then his voice cracked with an emotion I couldn't identify. Rachel, we need to talk. Right now. This can't wait until morning. The urgency in his tone was unlike anything I'd experienced during our marriage or divorce. Derek had always been composed, calculating, never allowing emotions to interfere with his carefully planned strategies. Whatever had prompted this midnight phone call had shaken him to his core. Derek, it's almost midnight. Whatever you want to discuss can wait until… No, it can't wait. His interruption was sharp, almost panicked. Rachel, I know what you've been doing. I know about the investigator, about the surveillance, about everything you think you've discovered. My blood turned cold. Marcus had warned me this moment would come, when Derek realized his secrets were being exposed and his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The question was whether Derek would respond with manipulation or desperation, and his tone suggested he'd chosen the latter. I don't know what you're talking about, I said carefully, though my mind was racing. If Derek knew about Marcus's investigation, there was no telling what other information he might have, or what actions he might take to protect himself. Quote, Don't lie to me, Rachel. I know Marcus Rodriguez has been following me, photographing me, digging into my business affairs. I know you've been building some kind of case against me. Derek's voice carried a note of hysteria that was completely foreign to his usual composed demeanor. I remained silent, remembering Marcus's advice about letting desperate people reveal information through their own panic rather than confirming or denying their suspicions. Derek had always been unable to tolerate silence during confrontations, and his current emotional state suggested he might reveal more than he intended. I know about the recordings, Derek continued, his voice rising. Someone's been monitoring my phone conversations, my meetings with Vanessa. That's illegal, Rachel. That's wiretapping. Invasion of privacy. You could go to jail for this. His accusation contained enough truth to be concerning, but also enough desperation to suggest he was grasping for any weapon he could find to regain control of the situation. Derek had never cared about legal technicalities when they served his purposes, but now he was invoking them like protective shields against the consequences of his own actions. Derek, I think you should talk to your attorney about whatever concerns you have, I said, maintaining the neutral tone Marcus had coached me to use during any direct confrontations. I don't have an attorney anymore. Derek's composure finally cracked completely. Vanessa had to withdraw from the case because of your accusations about our relationship. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand the damage you've caused? The shift in his tone from panic to anger was immediate and unsettling. This was the Derek I remembered from our worst marital fights, the man who could transform from charming to cruel, within seconds when his control was threatened. I've caused damage? I found my own voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Derek, you stole my children. You've been lying to Judge Lawson about your ability to care for them, while your sister does all the actual parenting. You've been funding your custody battle with money that belongs to other people. You don't understand anything about my business affairs, Derek snapped. Those are complex financial arrangements that someone with your limited education couldn't possibly comprehend. Even in crisis, Derek couldn't resist condescending to me, treating my legitimate concerns as evidence of my intellectual inadequacy, rather than addressing the substance of his deceptive behavior. It was a pattern I'd endured throughout our marriage, and hearing it now only strengthened my resolve to protect our children from his manipulation. I understand enough to know that using investor deposits to pay for your personal expenses is fraud, I replied, surprised by the steel in my own voice. I understand that you've been deceiving the court about your financial stability while your business empire collapses around you. The silence that followed was long enough that I wondered if Derek had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a cold threat that made my skin crawl. Rachel, you need to understand something very clearly. If you continue down this path, if you try to use whatever information you think you have against me, there will be consequences. Serious consequences. Are you threatening me, Derek? I'm warning you, there are things you don't know, situations you don't understand. If you force me to defend myself aggressively, people might get hurt. People you care about. The veiled reference to harming others, possibly including our children, crossed a line that even Derek had never approached during our marriage. Whatever pressures he was facing had pushed him into territory that revealed his true character more clearly than any surveillance footage or financial records could. Derek, if you're threatening to hurt Chloe or Tyler— I'm not threatening anyone, he interrupted, but his tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply explaining that complicated situations sometimes have unintended consequences. Accidents happen when people push too hard. I was recording the call now, using the app Marcus had installed on my phone for exactly this purpose. Derek's implicit threats would provide additional evidence of his unfitness as a custodial parent, but more importantly, they revealed the dangerous mindset of a man whose carefully planned deceptions were unraveling. Derek, listen to yourself. You're talking about accidents and consequences because someone discovered the truth about your business fraud and your lies to the family court. Do you realize how that sounds? Quote, "It sounds like someone who's been backed into a corner by vindictive accusations and illegal surveillance," Derek replied, his voice steadying into something more calculated. "Rachel, I'm going to make you an offer, one time only." Here it comes, I thought. The manipulation disguised as generous compromise, the false choice designed to make me feel like I was gaining something while actually surrendering everything that mattered. Drop your investigation. Fire Marcus Rodriguez. Instruct your attorney to withdraw all these ridiculous motions about Vanessa and my business affairs. Do that, and we can return to our original custody arrangement. The offer was exactly what I'd expected. Derek trying to trade my children's well-being for his own protection from the legal consequences of his fraudulent behavior. He was essentially admitting that everything Marcus had discovered was accurate, but offering to return to the status quo if I agreed to remain silent about his crimes. "And if I don't accept your generous offer?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Derek's voice turned ice cold. "Then I'll make sure you never see Chloe and Tyler again. I'll have you declared an unfit mother who engaged in illegal surveillance and harassment of their father. I'll make sure Judge Lawson understands that you're willing to destroy your children's stability for the sake of revenge against their devoted father." The casual cruelty in his tone was breathtaking. Derek was threatening to permanently destroy my relationship with our children unless I agreed to cover up his financial crimes and ethical violations. He was using Chloe and Tyler as human shields to protect himself from the consequences of his own choices. "Derek, those children you're threatening to take away from me forever?" they're also your children. You're talking about traumatizing your own son and daughter to protect your business schemes. I'm talking about protecting them from a mother who's become obsessed with destroying their father rather than focusing on their actual needs, Derek replied smoothly. Children need stability, Rachel. They need consistent care from a parent who can provide for their future, rather than wasting resources on private investigators and legal revenge fantasies. His ability to reframe his own criminal behavior as protective parenting, while characterizing my fight for justice as vindictive obsession, was both impressive and horrifying. Derek had always been skilled at manipulation, but desperation had sharpened those abilities into weapons designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. You have 24 hours to decide, Derek continued. Fire Rodriguez. Instruct your attorney to drop all pending motions, and publicly acknowledge that you were mistaken about the allegations against me. Do that, and we return to shared custody. Refuse, and I promise you'll spend the rest of your life seeing your children for a few supervised hours each month. The ultimatum was delivered with the same tone Derek had once used to negotiate real estate contracts, as if my children's emotional well-being was just another business transaction to be managed for his benefit. And what about your business fraud? I asked. What about the families who've lost their life savings to fund your lifestyle? What about the investors who trusted you with their retirement money? Those are separate issues that have nothing to do with our custody arrangements, Derek said dismissively. My business affairs are complex financial instruments that will ultimately benefit everyone involved once current market conditions improve. Even facing exposure and potential prosecution, Derek couldn't admit that his Ponzi-style development schemes were inherently fraudulent rather than temporarily inconvenient. His capacity for self-deception was matched only by his willingness to sacrifice anyone, including our children, to maintain his fabricated version of reality. Derek, do you hear yourself? You're asking me to help you cover up crimes that have hurt innocent families, and you're threatening to destroy our children's relationship with their mother if I refuse. What kind of man does that make you? It makes me a man who's willing to do whatever is necessary to protect his family and his livelihood, Derek replied without hesitation. Rachel, you've never understood the pressures of providing for a family, maintaining a business, creating opportunities for our children's future. You've always had the luxury of moral simplicity because someone else handled the complex decisions. Quote, his dismissal of my concerns as moral simplicity, while characterizing his fraud as complex decision-making, revealed the fundamental disconnect between Derek's perception of himself and the reality of his choices. In his mind, he was still the responsible provider, making difficult but necessary sacrifices, rather than a criminal who'd been caught stealing from hardworking families. I don't need 24 hours to decide, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. I won't help you cover up fraud, and I won't stop fighting for my children just because you've threatened to destroy their lives if I don't cooperate. The silence that followed felt dangerous, loaded with the potential for escalation that Marcus had warned me about. Derek had invested too much time, money, and ego in his custody battle to accept defeat gracefully, and my refusal to capitulate to his ultimatum had backed him into the corner he'd been desperately trying to avoid. You're making a terrible mistake, Rachel, Derek said finally, his voice carrying a finality that suggested our conversation was over. You think you're fighting for justice, but you're actually destroying any chance our children have for a stable, secure future. Our children deserve a future built on truth, not one purchased with stolen money and maintained through lies, I replied. And they deserve to know that their mother never stopped fighting for them, regardless of the cost. Derek's bitter laugh contained no humor. We'll see how noble your principles feel when you're explaining to Chloe and Tyler why they can only see you for a few hours each month in a supervised setting. We'll see how much they appreciate your commitment to truth when their friends ask why their mother is rarely around. With that parting cruelty, Derek ended the call, leaving me alone in my dark bedroom with the recording that would provide crucial evidence in our upcoming court proceedings. His threats and ultimatums had revealed more about his character than months of surveillance could have captured, demonstrating his willingness to weaponize our children's emotional well-being for his own protection. I immediately called Marcus Rodriguez, despite the late hour. His groggy voice answered on the third ring. immediately sharpening to professional alertness when I explained what had just happened. Derek's panicking. Marcus confirmed after listening to key portions of the recorded conversation. That ultimatum was an admission of guilt wrapped in a threat. He's essentially confirmed everything we've suspected about his business fraud, while simultaneously demonstrating his willingness to harm the children to protect himself. What happens now? I asked, though I suspected the answer would involve increased danger for everyone involved. Now Derek becomes unpredictable, Marcus replied grimly. He's realized that his carefully constructed lies are about to collapse, and he's chosen aggression over damage control. We need to be prepared for him to escalate his tactics in ways that might put you and the children at risk. The warning sent chills through me, but also strengthened my resolve. Derek had shown me exactly who he really was during that midnight phone call. Not the devoted father he pretended to be in court, but a desperate criminal willing to traumatize his own children to avoid accountability for his choices. Tomorrow, Lisa Chen would file emergency motions based on Derek's recorded threats, and Judge Lawson would finally see the man I'd been trying to describe for months. Derek's desperate gambit to intimidate me into silence had instead provided the final piece of evidence needed to demonstrate his unfitness as a custodial parent. The battle for my children was entering its final phase, and Derek Sullivan had just revealed that he was willing to destroy everything, including Chloe and Tyler's emotional well-being, rather than accept responsibility for his fraudulent behavior. But his threats had also revealed his weakness, desperation born of knowing that his lies were finally catching up with him. Soon, very soon, my children would learn that their mother had never stopped fighting for them, and Derek would discover that mothers who protect their children are far more dangerous than criminals who mistake manipulation for strength. Judge Patricia Lawson's courtroom felt different that Friday morning. Gone was the intimidating atmosphere that had previously favored Derek's polished presentations and expensive legal team. Today, the evidence spread across Lisa Chen's table told a story that no amount of charm or manipulation could overcome. Derek sat alone at the defendant's table, his new court-appointed attorney frantically reviewing files that had been thrust upon him just days earlier. Without Vanessa Price's strategic guidance and intimate knowledge of his deceptions, Derek looked smaller somehow. Less imposing than the commanding figure who'd once threatened to strip away my parental rights. Your Honor, Lisa began, standing with the confidence of someone who held irrefutable evidence. We present recorded conversations that demonstrate Mr. Sullivan's willingness to threaten both Mrs. Harper and the children themselves to avoid accountability for his fraudulent business practices. The audio recording of Derek's midnight phone call filled the courtroom with his own words. His threats, his ultimatums, his casual dismissal of investor fraud as financial instruments created a damning portrait of a man whose priorities placed self-preservation above his children's well-being. Judge Lawson's expression grew increasingly stern as Derek's voice detailed his willingness to permanently separate Chloe and Tyler from their mother unless she agreed to cover up his crimes. When the recording concluded, the courtroom's silence felt heavy with the weight of revealed truth. Mr. Sullivan, Judge Lawson said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd heard enough lies, do you dispute the authenticity of this recording? Derek's new attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Derek shook his head and stood to address the court directly. Your Honor, that conversation was taken out of context. Mrs. Harper had been conducting illegal surveillance against me, and I was simply trying to protect my children from her vindictive behavior. Even facing complete exposure, Derek couldn't resist attempting manipulation, framing his criminal threats as protective parenting while characterizing my fight for justice as vindictive harassment. Marcus Rodriguez took the witness stand with the calm professionalism of someone who'd spent decades presenting evidence in courtrooms. His testimony methodically destroyed every pillar of Derek's custody case, from the financial fraud that funded his lifestyle to the actual child care arrangements that contradicted his claims of devoted fatherhood. Mr. Sullivan's sister Karen provided the majority of hands-on parenting, Marcus testified. Derek typically dropped the children at her residence by 7:30 a.m. and retrieved them after 8 p.m., sometimes as late as 10 o'clock on school nights. The surveillance photographs spoke louder than any testimony. Derek at expensive restaurants during homework time. Derek playing golf during parent-teacher conferences. Derek meeting with business associates while claiming to be focused on childcare responsibilities. When Dr. Amanda Foster took the stand to recant her original psychological evaluation, Derek's case completely collapsed. I was provided with selective information that painted an incomplete picture of the family dynamics, she testified. Had I known about Mr. Sullivan's actual parenting arrangements and business pressures, my assessment would have been significantly different. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Karen Sullivan, Derek's own sister, had been subpoenaed by Lisa Chen and chose to tell the truth about the children's actual living situation. Derek loves Chloe and Tyler, Karen said carefully, but he's been overwhelmed by his business problems. I've been caring for them most days and evenings for the past several months. The children have repeatedly asked me when they can see their mother again. Derek's face flushed with anger as his sister's testimony exposed the fiction he'd maintained about his hands-on parenting, but there was nothing his overwhelmed attorney could do to repair the damage of truthful testimony from his own family member. Judge Lawson's final ruling was swift and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, including Mr. Sullivan's recorded threats and his documented pattern of deceptive behavior, I find that the children's best interests are served by returning them to their mother's primary custody. The words I'd dreamed of hearing for months felt surreal when they finally came. Primary custody. My children coming home. Justice for the families Derek had defrauded through his business schemes. But Judge Lawson wasn't finished. Mr. Sullivan will have supervised visitation rights pending the resolution of the criminal fraud charges currently under investigation. The court also orders immediate reimbursement of all legal fees incurred by Mrs. Harper in defending against these frivolous custody motions. Derek's world collapsed in real time. Criminal charges. Supervised visits with his own children. Financial reimbursement for the legal battle he'd forced me to fight. The man who'd threatened to destroy my relationship with Chloe and Tyler was now facing the complete destruction of everything he'd tried to protect through lies and manipulation. That afternoon, I stood outside Meadowbrook Academy waiting for my children to emerge from their final day at the expensive private school Derek had used as evidence of his superior parenting. Chloe appeared first, her face lighting up with pure joy when she saw me waiting by the regular pickup area instead of watching from a distance during supervised visits. "Mommy!" she called, running toward me with 8-year-old abandon. "Are we really going home? Are we really going to live with you again?" Tyler emerged moments later, clutching his backpack and scanning the pickup area until he spotted me. His smile was radiant as he raced to join our reunion hug, both children pressing against me like they were afraid I might disappear if they let go. "We're going home, babies," I whispered, holding them tight and breathing in the familiar scent of their hair. "We're going home, and we're going to stay together." The drive to our modest apartment felt like the most important journey of my life. Chloe chattered excitedly about returning to Sunset Elementary and seeing her old friends. Tyler asked if he could decorate his room exactly the way he wanted it, without worrying about keeping everything perfect for Daddy's inspections. 3 months later, our lives had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and wonderfully new. The children had readjusted to their old school with remarkable resilience, though both still attended therapy sessions to process the trauma of their temporary separation from me. Derek's criminal trial was proceeding slowly through the legal system, with multiple investor families coming forward to testify about their financial losses. His business empire had collapsed completely, leaving him facing potential prison time and massive civil judgments. But more importantly, Chloe and Tyler were thriving in the stability of consistent care and unconditional love. Their anxiety had diminished significantly once they realized they wouldn't be separated from me again, and both children had started talking about their father's behavior with the clarity that only comes from emotional safety. "Daddy always seemed angry," Tyler confided during one of our bedtime conversations. "Even when he smiled, his eyes looked mad. Why was he so angry all the time?" The question broke my heart, but also provided an opportunity for age-appropriate honesty about the situation they'd experienced. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, and then they get angry when there are consequences for those choices. Daddy made some bad decisions, and instead of trying to fix them, he got angry at everyone else. Chloe, wise beyond her years, nodded thoughtfully. Is that why he tried to keep us away from you? Because he was angry about his bad choices? Yes, sweetheart. But the most important thing to remember is that none of his choices were your fault, and you're safe now. Marcus Rodriguez became more than just the investigator who'd saved our family. He attended Chloe's school play and Tyler's soccer games, becoming the kind of steady male presence in their lives that Derek had never actually been, despite his claims of devoted fatherhood. You fought for them when it mattered most, Marcus told me after Tyler's team won their first game of the season. Those children will always remember that their mother never gave up, never stopped believing they deserved better. The legal settlement from Derek's fraudulent schemes provided enough financial stability for me to leave the veterinary clinic and pursue the education degree I'd abandoned during my marriage. In 2 years, I'd be teaching elementary school, helping other children while building the secure future my own children deserved. Derek's supervised visits became increasingly infrequent as his legal troubles mounted. The children adapted to his absence with surprising ease, suggesting that his actual presence in their lives had been less significant than his dramatic claims about devoted fatherhood. Judge Lawson's final order in our case included language that would protect other families from similar manipulation. Legal reforms inspired by our situation now required more thorough investigation of custody claims involving sudden changes to established arrangements. Late one evening, as I tucked Chloe and Tyler into their beds in our small but loving home, Tyler asked a question that captured the essence of our journey. "Mommy, are bad people always stronger than good people?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes bad people seem stronger because they're willing to hurt others to get what they want, but good people have a different kind of strength. We fight for love instead of fighting for ourselves, and love always wins in the end. Chloe called from her room. "Like how you fought for us." "Exactly like how I fought for you, and how you'll fight for people you love when you're grown up." As I turned off their lights and listened to their peaceful breathing, I reflected on how completely our lives had transformed. Derek had tried to teach our children that power came from money and manipulation, that love was conditional on meeting expectations and reflecting well on parental status. Instead, they'd learned that real strength comes from standing up for truth, that love fights fiercely for those who matter, and that justice is possible even when facing overwhelming odds. Most importantly, they'd learned that their mother would never stop fighting for them, regardless of the cost or consequences. The battle for my children had ended with victory, but more significantly, it had begun a new chapter where Chloe and Tyler would grow up knowing they were unconditionally loved and fiercely protected. Derek's attempt to destroy our family had ultimately made us stronger, more bonded, and more grateful for the simple gift of being together. Justice had prevailed, love had conquered manipulation, and my children were finally home where they belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.